Hello everyone, welcome back to another Strategoi video. Ryan here with yet another tournament report. This time a one-dayer, the week before, let's call it a week and a half before Worlds, where I was taking my Worlds Lumineth list to train to see how it performs in a tournament setting, since I'd missed my chance to do so in Bruges. Actually, I was going to bring a KO list to Bruges, but missed my chance to train with that. And this was my only opportunity in a tournament setting to practice before Worlds actually came up. Granted, I have other competitive players that I can play against here in the Netherlands, but this was kind of a no-brainer. And ended up being some of the only games I got right before Worlds itself. So it proved to be definitely a logical choice, even if, unfortunately, as you'll see in the review, my matchups did not necessarily reflect true Worlds training, but we'll get to that. Anyway, before we move on, just a friendly reminder to join the Discord, comment down below, let us know what you thought of the video and what you've been thinking about our Worlds coverage in general, as this is somewhat Worlds adjacent. Yeah, subscribe, like, and all the normal good YouTube stuff. All that really helps boost the signal for the channel. So thank you again for checking in to one of our videos. All right, so as per usual with our tournament reviews, we'll basically be covering the general tournament itself, the general details, covering my army list and my matchups, and then concluding with some thoughts. This should be a relatively short one. As I've talked about my list a good bit before, we'll be covering it more in the Worlds coverage after this video goes live. And it was just me at this tournament, as opposed to having Nick there or someone else that I invited to be on the channel. Also, because I've had so much kind of in my head for the past week and a half with World stuff, my memory of some of these games might be a little bit fuzzy now at this point. So my excuses to my opponents if it feels like I'm shortchanging our matchups a little bit. It's not intentional. It's just I've had a lot going on. So as far as the tournament itself, we'll be covering the rules pack, the meta, and the experience. This is my first time going to this event. This is in a gaming club that we have in Haarlem. For those that aren't aware, Haarlem is a smaller city to the northwest of Amsterdam, which is what Haarlem in the United States, in New York, was named after, considering that New York City was originally New Amsterdam, and a number of different areas in New York have names of Dutch origin. We just take one of the A's out, and you've got the American Haarlem, or this Haarlem has an extra A, if you want to look at it that way. Nick actually lives kind of nearby, so it would have been logical to have Nick to join us, but he was out of town on vacation before Worlds. And I'd been to the club once before, just for like a training day. I think they have game nights every single Thursday, which is one of the most active clubs that I know of that we have in the Netherlands. A lot of our club scene here is more once per month-ish or bi-weekly kind of thing. But the group that's there is often more 40K oriented, if I'm not mistaken. This was a small tournament. It's called Battle for the Allpoints Battle 2. I believe that means that it's kind of in a series. I don't know if people's scores are maintained over the course of the different battles, if it's kind of like a league. But in any case, it was 16 players, 3 games because it's a one-dayer, 3 hours each. I left 3 rounds minimum in here, but I don't know if that was actually part of the battle pack. We've kind of left that in the slides. Maybe it's not as necessary, but that is kind of a goal that everyone tries to reach. The 3 missions we were playing were Jaws of Galat, Ours for the Taking, and Only the Worthy. And then the scoring, if I'm not mistaken, was not based off of differential system, but instead was a Swiss point. So if you won, you got 3 points. If you tied, you got 1. And if you lost, you got 0. And then these were kind of buffered by other elements for pairing, like whether you got your grand strategy or battle tactics or whatever. All right, moving on to the meta. So the player base was a mix of seasoned and more casual players. It was only 16 people, so it could only be so so intense. But there were definitely a few lists there that were pretty scary, and then there were a ton of new faces for me at least. A large chunk of the people there were from this gaming club in the area, so I still definitely have more people to meet. As far as what's represented, I decided to show it here based off of Grand Alliance. So we had KO, Seraphon, and Lumineth from Order. We had in Chaos we had Slaves and Zinch each 3 times. So Chaos clearly took the win here in those 2 armies for most popular. Plus a 1 Beast, 1 Corn army. In Death we had a Soulblight player and an OBR player. And in Destruction, we had Ironjaws and Big Wa from War Clans, and then we had Giths. So things that are missing that might be obvious. Let's see. So in Order, we didn't have Ideneth, City, Sylvaneth, Dock, Stormcast, or Fire Slayers. I'm not sure. I mean, depending on how you look at it, some of those are more obviously like, why didn't we have them than others? I suppose I would say Stormcast and Fire Slayers, considering Fire Slayers is pretty competitive right now in at least a team setting. And Stormcast, just because it's been so popular. That said, the Battle Tome is starting to feel older. But there usually at a tournament is at least one Stormcast player, just kind of because that's what they have. As far as what was missing from Chaos, obviously the 2 other gods that we don't see here, Nurgle and Slanesh. Definitely Slanesh being a bit of a surprise, considering how much better that book's gotten. And then Skaven. I was a little surprised not to see Skaven because there's always seems to be someone who loves that army and brings them to tournaments, especially as it's a good chance to show off your painting, I think. And I know my buddy Yari was there, who I played against at a tournament in Alblasserdam almost a year ago. That was the first time we met, and this is the second time I ever saw him. But he was playing Skaven the first time I met him, and we played, but this time he was playing Giths, so no Skaven. As far as Death is concerned, we're missing Nighthaunt and Feck. Feck's no surprise, because there aren't that many Feck players outside of Nick, and Nick wasn't there. Although, I have a feeling Nick would have been playing Giths had he been there, because he was training for Worlds as well. Nighthaunt, I guess, is a little surprising. They're pretty popular. And then out of Destruction, Suns, Cruel Boys / Bone Splitters, and Ogres. Of those, I guess the only one I'm kind of surprised wasn't there was Ogres, maybe. But anyway, it is what it is. This is, a smaller group of people, and like I said, it's a mix of seasoned and more casual players, so hence, maybe being a little less expected meta-wise. All right, as far as the experience is concerned, the lunch was fantastic. They had pho, and that it was like way higher quality than I was expecting from a gaming club in a basement. Like there have been other clubs of similar size that I've been to where you kind of wanted to bring your own food, and I was like, wow, this is almost like gourmet. It was good, and I was, I always bring snacks and stuff. It might not have been the most filling, but it was delicious. I would totally go back for that, definitely. No qualms. And the atmosphere was super friendly. In fact, the guy running the tournament, Yoop, he was my favorite new person I met that day, because he ended up not only being super friendly and welcoming. I was the only non-native Dutch speaker there, and he was kind to, sometimes people like to switch on me a lot, or at least more when they're getting to know me. And he was, really cool about just welcoming into the group. I think we'd met before, actually, that one club day I went to before, but it was very brief in passing. And he also helped me set up a trainings day with Team Australia, or at least a subset of Team Australia, the coach plus 2 of the 8 players. The Monday before Worlds, which was really nice. He wasn't there that day. My buddy Daly was there to help us open up, but that was really nice. So big shout out to the club there in Haarlem for being flexible and willing to, set other stuff up. I'm definitely looking forward to going back to another tournament and enjoyed the atmosphere. Getting to know some of those people would be really nice. My personal experience, I went 1-2, which is kind of a bummer, of course, but as you'll see, foreshadowing leading into Worlds, this version of the Lumineth list I was playing just is not optimized, especially after the points changes and what I had to take out of the list based off of what I thought my team needed. We'll talk more about Worlds later, but in general, this tournament was definitely foreshadowing. But one of the reasons it wasn't as foreshadowing-y as it could have been is that out of my 3 matchups, one was one was New Soulblight, which first off, Worlds didn't have a whole lot of Soulblight. It certainly didn't have New Soulblight because the rules cutoff was before the new book was official. Even though that was a lovely game, my first ever game with Rule Kuhmeister, who is a friendly guy to play against and would totally love to play against more. Fortunately, he's very eager to be playing in the scene, so I'm sure that'll happen sooner than later. Then I played against the last game was against a Seraphon player, Auk, where, again, I'll go into matchups later, but Seraphon, I think, only had maybe one, if no lists at Worlds, and or maybe there was one, and the chances you were going to come across it just weren't high, and obviously they were sitting in limbo with their book as well. And then I played against my buddy Hugo in the middle there, his Tzeentch army, but his Tzeentch army was a Host Arcanum army, which is horrible for a Teclis build because Host Arcanum has the Battle Round 1, 3, and 5 auto unbind, which is just brutal for a caster. Like getting into your battle tactics, which could often are magic reliant. It was just a bad matchup. So it did teach me I don't want to go against Host Arcanum, that for sure. But the other 2 weren't exactly Worlds prep. But it was still lovely. I had a nice day. And like I say here, only played against friendly opponents. Every single person was lovely and or already a friend. And I would definitely come back to this tournament. Shout out to the team there at the club in Uke for setting up a nice environment. All right, so my list. Archmage net list, as I've been saying, because I don't usually play spiky net list type things. It started much stronger. When I first had this list, it was before the points changes, and it was I went 7 out of 8. So a 7-1 with the list in my first 8 games, including only 1 loss at that Osnabrück Teams tournament. I went 4-1 at that Teams tournament, which was great. So I had a lot more faith in this than it ended up proving out to be. With the points changes, as many of you know, the Sentinels got more expensive, the Cathalar got a little more expensive, the Wind Chargers got a little more expensive. And for me, that was an 80-point increase, which meant I had to drop the Lord Regent, who was providing redundancy for getting Power of Hish off, and then, of course, if he got it off, then the other units could do other spells. Got rid of him, and then changed up my endless spells before. I had a Life Swarm in there instead of Shackles. So Shackles was... I wanted to get 3 endless spells in there because Lumineth has a good battle tactic of having 2 or more endless spells on the table at the end of the turn. And I find that if you just have to have 2, all they have to do is shut down one of them. And that's pretty easy to do, but if you have 3, it gets a lot harder, especially with the casting values of these 3 endless spells. Rune being casting value 8, so they need a 9 without any modifications. Shackles being 7, so they need an 8, and Gravetide being a 6, so they need a 7. So it's actually pretty easy to get that that battle tactic if you have 3 endless spells, especially with those casting values. I didn't have Spell Portal because my Tzeentch player, who I was playing as a Merc for Team Serbia in Worlds, he really wanted to have it. And it turns out that the general consensus is the Lumineth player, if you must make that decision, the Lumineth player should have it. But, I should have maybe fought more for that. And it would have helped me control some stuff a lot better. But live and learn. And I had a great time at Worlds, by the way. I'll talk about it more later, of course. And I had a good time at this tournament that we're talking about here, the Allpoints. Let's see what else. The Cathalar. Master of Magic had also... I was going to try to get that, but one of the other players wanted it. So I stuck with Lore Master to let me know 3 spells, of which that did come into play because I had the Silver Wand, which is basically what Arcane Tome does now, or used to do, but it actually does what it wants to do, giving a wizard an extra spell to cast. So the Cathalar was often casting Darkness of the Soul, or Total Eclipse here, or Overwhelming Heat, or Endless Spell. Those are kind of the top 4 things. I never cast Protection of Hish the whole time, but that was a kind of redundancy if Teclis were to die. Oh, I misspelled Archmage. Archimage. Archimage Teclis. Oops. If Teclis died, then you got Protection of Hish. An interesting thing about Protection of Hish is that the Knight Zephyros in my list would be protected by him because it just has friendly units, even though Protection of Teclis used to say that. It doesn't anymore. And then, yeah, Teclis, everyone knows what Teclis does. He's, indispensable, really. He's fantastic. I still love playing with Teclis, but I know people that feel like he's too much of a point sink. Compared to Nagash or something like that, he's definitely worth his points. He's not bad in combat, and the amount of tricks that I ended up learning to use with Teclis over time, he's easily one of my favorite tech pieces, if you want to call him that, in a game. He's like a overpowered OP tech piece, but there are so many cool combos you can do with him. Teleporting him and then doing stuff is so fun. But we'll talk more about that in games where it actually came up. I don't think I really used it in these games. So Knight Zephyros is an ally here. Oh, and I had a spell underneath him. That's totally wrong. And that's a Tzeentch spell. Oops. I went through this relatively quickly because I want to get this video out. So ignore that. The Knight Zephyros cannot take a spell. He's an ally, so even if he was a spellcaster, he wouldn't be able to take a spell other than... No, he wouldn't be able to take anything. He'd just be able to cast the endless spells. Because he can't take enhancements. But he is an ally, and he teleports. He's fast if you want, but he can teleport out of combat. And he has enough shooting attacks / melee prowess to be able to maybe knock off a GC or something for a battle tactic. But you're mainly using him for GC battle tactics, and then considering the Cathalar is also a GC, you could teleport her with Teclis' spell and then teleport the Zephyros with his own ability to go grab a couple objectives with some of those current GC things that we have in the Gleason Champions GHB. I think the rest of this should be accurate. We got 10 Wardens as battle line, turning on one of my 20 blocks of Sentinels. You can't have both in this build. You would need another unit of Wardens to do that. One of my Sentinels units has Speed of Hish and the other has Protection. And then the Wardens have Speed of Hish as well, which I did cast every once in a while. I often did not cast Power of Hish on the Wardens in general because they either were just going to die, they were just a screen, or I felt like another spell was more worth it, like putting Shackles up or something. The Wind Chargers are, along with the Knight Zephyros, are my only two non-casters in the army. The Wind Chargers, just fast, can be used as a screen, can go get some objectives, can be extra fast with Speed of Hish, ignore wounds, ward saves on their missile shots. And by the way, I'm in Halon here, so I'm getting double attacks, or +1 attack, but double on the Sentinels and Teclis if I'm within 6 inches of my target, and they all shoot there. Unfortunately, my grand strategy was defend what's ours, which is unfortunate because defend what's ours is just so unbalanced compared to take what's theirs, but we had a little miscommunication on my team, and I ended up taking it because I thought two of the other team members really wanted to take what's theirs, which is the only one that really worked in my list, and something changed last minute before we submitted lists. There was a lot of frantic kind of second guessing happening during that week for multiple reasons, and I wasn't informed, and then I turned into Defend What's Ours. It would have definitely made a difference, but it is what it is, and it's doable for a castle army like this. It's maybe more doable than for some other armies, but I wouldn't say it's particularly great. Honestly, I might have been better off with Day as Ours for the more GCs than my opponent. But again, live and learn. And then endless spells, like I said, I got Rune, which slows down charges and runs, but mainly it's just double hitting every turn in the movement phase. On a 4+, does D3 mortal wounds against non-Lumineth units, which can hit my Zephyros, so I got to be careful about that. Shackles is kind of the secret tech of the list, if you want to say, because you don't see it in the meta a lot. It has to be set up in kind of like a triangle, and it implicitly is going to hit the caster every turn on a 6, every unit within 6 of any one of the 3 pieces. on a 6 ends up suffering D3 mortal wounds. I've actually definitely ended up doing more damage against myself than other people. But the idea is you set it up and then walk backwards or teleport someone out after they've cast it. But it hits at the beginning of the movement phase, and there's no way to set it up in a way that your caster isn't within 6 at the beginning because of the whole within 8 restriction and how big the spells are, the bases are. So, but what it really does is any unit that tries to start a run or a charge while they're within 6 inches, even one model towing in, can't do those things. So it was very much a lifeline that I needed to keep people from like engaging my castle or bringing their melee army in. As I said to multiple people, of the Lumineth lists that were at this tournament, I definitely had the most defensive, apart from, of course, that I didn't have Spell Portal to project things from afar. But unfortunately, at a casting value of 7, which is relatively high for an endless spell, the average I think is 6, it's a little harder to dispel, but it wasn't hard enough that people sometimes couldn't shut it down in clutch moments where I really needed it to stay on the table. And Suffocating Gravetide is kind of an anti-horde spell, but the main reason you take it is just to act as a block, a buffer, so that they can't land a charge within half inch of quite a large base. And my whole list was in a battle regiment, so it was a full 2,000 points, 1 drop, 86 wounds, 64 bodies, 63 models if you include the endless spells. 2 reinforcements, which would be on the 2 Sentinels units, 1 ally, and 1 drop. Again, the Zephyros doesn't have a spell, and it's Archmage Teclis. Alright, moving on. So, my matchups. I played first against New Soulblight, as I mentioned before, my buddy Rule Kuhlmeister. Our first actual time playing against each other, but we've known of each other for a while, and we were supposed to play on a team together in Osnabrück, but that kind of fell through. He was playing a Virkos list. Second time against New Soulblight, but first time against Virkos, I believe. And he had 80 Graveguard. I'll have to admit, I'm not a huge what you see is what you get, like Nazi, if you want to say. But he was using skeletons, and I played against Soulblight more than I played against any other unit in the game, or any other army in the game. I think I've played something like 33 times against Soulblight out of 250 games. And he was using skeletons for all of his Graveguard. And I'm okay with the idea of proxying, but I know what skeletons look like and what Graveguard look like. And I kept underestimating what was happening when he had them off board. And I kept asking him, well, those are skeletons, right? He's like, no, those are Graveguard, like I said. And I'm like, it really can make a difference, especially if you're used to seeing a specific unit. Not saying he was playing foul or anything like that, but... and not saying that's why I lost this game, but it did keep popping up. So when I looked back at his list and saw that it was 80 Graveguard, I was like, really? That many? Because my brain never truly processed that those were Graveguard. Even though, yeah, they did hit like Graveguard, of course. The real problem with this list, for me, he had a bunch of GCs too. The real problem for this list was we were playing Jaws of Gallet, if I'm not mistaken, was just the sheer amount of bodies he had and bringing things back and this, that, or the other. It was a lovely game. He's super friendly. I had a great time playing it. And again, I don't remember the details too well, but it was definitely a rough one for me in terms of getting the points. I forget what the final score was on this, but yeah, it was a rough one. And I get what people mean about Soulblight being good. That said, it didn't do anything. This list didn't do anything Soulblighty that I hadn't seen a million times before. Just I've always had a problem with my elite armies against so many bodies, and that they just don't seem to die. So my record against Soulblight is definitely a losing record in general. And this didn't feel unfair. It just felt like an updated version of what I was used to. So, which I always thought was a little bit, for me, it's always a bad matchup with the kind of armies I play. But I'm sure someone else has got a better solution for it. But Rule played it well, and I'm glad I did a 4-hour review of the book, because otherwise I would have had no clue what was going on with the new book. Especially considering I've been avoiding playing armies that I'm not going to see at Worlds, or that had new battle tomes in the meantime. So, but yeah, lovely game, and ended up losing. I think it was pretty close to a 0-20. I don't know I guess we weren't using a differential system, so I guess that doesn't really matter. But the next matchup was, and by the way, I was supposed to originally play a Stormcast list, if I'm not mistaken. And was that right? Gosh, it's been a while, and I'd totally forgotten about it. My original pairing was supposed to be Stormcast, and I'm pretty. Oh yeah, I know it 100%. It was almost the same list that one of my teammates on Team Serbia, Dragon, played, which was a Hallowed Knights like kind of tanky list. I know what to do against that list. I should have been okay, and unfortunately, it got switched. That guy dropped out last minute, and I got put against a list that I had less familiarity with, at least in the new book, and it was less in my favor. Turns out, second game, even though it was against a buddy of mine, Huho, he had actually won his first one. I'd lost the first one, and according to what I heard in the pairing system, there was actually a mistake that was made, and he wasn't actually supposed to play against me. And so this game, which was also not in my favor, also I wasn't supposed to play. So you can almost say that this was me having a little bit of a prep for what happens when pairings don't go the way you think they will in teams. So it was like I got a bad pairing unintentionally. Yeah, and I don't know 100% sure that that's what happened in the tournament, and no shade thrown. That's not my point here. I'm glad to have gotten to play against Hugo, and of course there's a version of reality where I would have had to play him anyway. But this was this Zinj list with the Host Arcanum, where they have the Battle Round 1, 3, and 5 auto unbind, which is just brutal against Teclis, because then you're basically almost forced to make Teclis cast one spell just so you get the one thing you need off. And knowing that he can unbind most of the rest with how good Kairos is at unbinding and the pluses and everything, it just made it kind of an uphill battle. His 20 Zongor, that wasn't really what I was scared of, though they did end up making a kind of Hail Mary. I think it could have gone either way at one point in the middle, but he got all the charges off he needed, and that cleared off the rest of me pretty hard. And then the 10 pinks, I made a mistake in not being able to get my wind chargers around the pinks to go grab this one objective. We were playing the mission. I forget what the name of it is. Maybe it's... I always forget these names. But it was the one where it's three like diagonal line objectives, and the two outermost ones are particularly close to the board edge, more than usual, not at the 15-inch mark, and the middle one counts as 2 points if you have a GC on it. And it just didn't go in my favor, but I got off the rune, and the rune was doing a crazy amount of damage against his blue scribes and his flux master and whoever else was standing in that area, and I almost killed Kairos. And this was one of those games where I was definitely starting at a disadvantage, even though, of course, Zinj doesn't like playing against Teclis. This is one of those games where even though I started at a disadvantage, I definitely could have come back if a couple things had worked in my favor. But that's, of course, not how you want to be playing. You want to be playing in such a way that even if things don't go in your favor, you still have a chance. And unfortunately, that just wasn't the case here. But Hugo is definitely a friend of mine, and again, lovely to get to play against him again. This is our second time at a tournament, by the way. The first time was at a Bloodstorm tournament. First game, if I'm not mistaken, where we played a mirror match. I had Eternal Conflag, and he had a more Zongor heavy build. And we had some crazy chaos happen in the middle of the board with 2 Burning Sigils of Zinj, which is always fun. And then my last matchup, because I was definitely fighting for the bottom end of the bracket at this point, was against the Seraphon list that was more of a casual list. Thunder Lizard usually is a problem, and that's what the TL is here. But Thunder Lizard in this build, let's put it this way, his skinks did way more work than anything else did in the army. I think they almost cleared a whole block of Sentinels, but between my spells that like in the low bravery of the Stegodon's Bastiladon, and then me just targeting them down, hitting them with mortals quite often, the spell, the Teclis spell bounce, the spell ignore that ends up bouncing mortal wounds back. And the guy I played against, he was lovely, Auk. I just don't think he had as much experience playing against my kind of list. It felt very one-sided by the end of it, and I won with a good number of points difference there. So that ended up pulling me up to 11th place out of 16 at the end of the day. It was a lovely game, and it just I think it's a rough matchup for Seraphon, because even though he's got a Slann, I'm pretty good at unbinding things myself. The spell ignore is brutal, and the low bravery stuff really shut down a lot of his key units. So, we played it out pretty quickly. And in his honor, I've got, and the fact that we don't mention Seraphon often on the channel, I've got a picture of the, I think that's the solar engine over there, right? Okay. So, in conclusion, like I said, I got 11th place out of 16. Not great. But, it could have been a totally different outcome if a couple of those pairings played out a little differently and the first guy didn't have to drop out or whatever. But again, that said, my Lumineth list, in short, is not only a known quantity or known entity for a lot of people out there, because it's just been so present for a long time, the Teclis Sentinel build, but also it's gutted a bit with the grand strategy and the, the lack of spell portal. So I've never actually played with that, by the way, with either one of those. I've never gotten to use Take What's There, or spell portal, and I think it's one of the reasons why going into the points changes, because I was at Osnabrück and I had already won 7 out of 8 games and only lost. I went 4-1 in Osnabrück. I was thinking, oh yeah, this list is going to be great still. And of course, going to Worlds was super high level meta, and then whatever ended up happening at this tournament battle for the Allpoints. Maybe it's also an indication. Huho's a great player, and I have a feeling he might be thinking of training with the Worlds team for next year. It sounds like it. And Rule definitely, I think, is. Rule is a fantastic player. I think at Worlds singles, he ended up being one of the highest scoring Dutch participants with his gits at that day. Rule's a great player. So, I have a feeling that this tournament was also, it wasn't like it was a walk in the park. I mean, my buddy Hank was there. Tone was there. Tone played with the Dutch team last year as a great player. And I think there were a couple other notable, particularly competitive people there. But the third place was Rule Kuhmeister, my Soulblight opponent, with his Virkos list. Second place was a guy I don't know. His name's Ricardo, and he was playing Khorne. No surprise that Khorne's good. We know this, and he's probably a great player too. I just don't know him personally. And first place went to Hank for his a millionth win in the last year. He was playing a KO list. I think for his first time. He's been playing KO, but he hadn't been playing this version of the list. So, congrats to Hank and to KO also for doing so well at the tournament. And thanks to Hank for driving me back and forth. That was nice. Future goals. Gosh. Obviously, if I had done this on time, the future goals would have been talking about Worlds. Am I playing Lumineth anytime soon? The default answer is no. But there is a part of me that really wants to play it with the meta version of the list. So Portal and Take What's Theirs and maybe a couple other things. Although I probably wouldn't swap out the Knight Zephyros if I didn't have to, because he really did come in clutch for a couple things. Being a teleporter and a GC. But future goals probably wraps more into the after Worlds discussion. But in short, I want to play cities as much as possible. Maybe not at tournaments, because I doubt how competitive they are with how many strong books have come out recently. But definitely playing some cities before all those rules fall away in September or whenever that book's going to come out. And then I'd like to play some more kind of fun lists, more of my Warp Lightning Cannon list. That would be great to get that painted up. Definitely more KO. I'll probably be bringing my KO melee list to upcoming tournaments of this size, this one-dayer size, and bigger if it happens. So that's that. Sorry for kind of rushing through this one. I feel like it doesn't really. It's kind of in this weird limbo stage between the regular tournament season and Worlds, and I've got so much ground to cover with World stuff coming up. We're not sure about how many videos we're going to be making, but I can tell you it's going to be at least a couple. We've got a table talk planned with Jonas, myself, and Nick that we'll be recording probably on the day that this goes, or no, probably a couple days after this, because I'm trying to post this tonight. So anyway, thanks again, guys, for listening, and feel free to like, share, and subscribe as always. Join us in the Discord in the comments section below. And until next time, Ryan out.